Welcome to another Livestream.travel podcast. Today you will be meeting Felice Friedson. Felice is head of the MediaLine.org, a newswire based in Washington, D.C., but she lives in Jerusalem, in Israel. We'll be talking about the situation of the travel and tourism industry in Israel and in the Middle East. Joining us also is Dr. Taleb Rifai. He was the former Secretary-General for the United Nations World Tourism Organization, UNWTO, and he's based in neighboring Jordan in their capital city of Amman. Dr. Peter Tarlow from Texas will be our co-host. He is in Texas and ahead of safertourism.com. Thank you for listening. Please enjoy. Sorry for the delay. Good morning from Hawaii. My name is Juergen Steinmetz. I'm with rebuilding.travel, eTurboNews. Welcome to our sessions with a little delay. We had some technical issues between all of us in all parts of the world. This is our second session today for some of you. It's morning here in Hawaii though, so I had a night's sleep, and I see some of you are joining us for the second time. Thank you for being there. We're going to have a really interesting session today with a focus on the situation in the Middle East, and we have some first-hand insight we're getting from our guest Felice Friedson, who just joined us from Jerusalem, and we also have Dr. Peter Tarlow, my co-host, on the line, and special welcome also to Cuthbert Nikube. He is the president of the African Tourism Board, joining us this morning. And so many of you, I cannot, I saw Alexandra. She is representing rebuilding.travel in the Balkan region and was on our session about the Seychelles earlier today. Welcome back. Maybe just to get started, I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Peter Tarlow, co-host, to say hello to everyone. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, or as I like to say to everyone, good. So it can be good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever, wherever you are in the world, good. I think today's a really important session. The Middle East is always an interesting part of the world. It's a part that I know very well. I'm often in Israel. And it's a part of the world that is really, truly the center of the world. As a matter of fact, there's an old saying that what's called the cornerstone in Jerusalem is point zero, and every place else in the world is marked from it. And to a great extent, when you're in Jerusalem or you're in the Middle East, you really do understand that you are in the middle of the world. Everything seems to be close and far. Today, the Middle East is clearly front and center. In Lebanon today, the government just resigned. We deal with issues from multiple countries throughout the Middle East, and yet there's also tremendous hope. Israel and many of the Arab nations are starting to work together to create a much better world. And if we're able to bring all the nations of the Middle East together, the world is going to take a major step forward in being able to create both mutual respect and love. It's a place from where Israel is the cradle of Western religion. Judaism, Christianity, Islam all come from that one small little piece of earth. And from it, there's a saying in Hebrew, Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah, which I'm going to translate loosely, not exactly, but from Jerusalem comes forth the basis of humanity. I'm translating Torah very loosely. But the whole idea that this little piece of land is created so much of the world and has so much to give the world. But the whole Middle East is that way. You go from Iraq to Egypt to Israel to Lebanon to Syria. These are countries that are fascinating. When in the United States, we say something is old when it's 200 years old. I live in Texas. In College Station, Texas, we say, this is an old building. It's 50 years old. When I get to the East Coast of the United States, they say it's old. It's 200 years old. When I get to Europe, they say, look at this old church. It's 600 years old. when you're in Israel, they don't even count old if it's not at least 2,000 years old. So it gives you an idea of the depths of civilization and how far people come back. So I know Felice will have much to tell us, and we'll be asking her lots of questions. But remember, we're talking about this cradle of Western civilization and to a great extent, world civilization. And from she's in ground zero. And from there, everything else emanates. So this is a really wonderful time, because if tourism can bring people together in the Middle East, then it can truly be a bridge to create peace and understanding for people from Africa to Asia to Latin America to Europe. And so this is a chance for all of us to come together. Let's not look at what divides us. Let's look at what unites us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Peter. Well said. Just some housekeeping information before we can get started. This is an interactive discussion, so we welcome your input. And if you wanted to get the microphone, all you need to do is go click on participants or click on chat, and there's like a little, I think it's a blue hand. You can click what gives us the indication that you wanted to speak, and we welcome this. Now, before we get started, I just wanted to ask everyone for a minute or a few seconds of silence in regards to the horrible situation in Lebanon. They have been hit not only through Corona, but as you know, recently with many dead through an explosion, what is just absolutely terrible. So I will take the opportunity to mute everyone, and then Felice, you can unmute yourself and we can get started. Thank you. Thank you very much. And Felice, we're ready for you. All you need to do is unmute yourself again. You're muted. The same thing you did before, just unmute yourself. We have some problem. She's speaking and she's, Felice, you need to unmute yourself, please. Like you did it before.
Okay, did that do it?
Yes,
now
there we go. Good morning, how
Hi,
are you?
everybody. Hello, everyone. Hi, Juergen Steinmetz and Dr. Peter Tarlow. Nice introduction. Sorry for some of the technical things going on, and if I told you where I lived, you'd understand. So, a lot of problems with technology. As a matter of fact, there were demonstrations close by, interestingly enough, having to do with culture here in Israel. You have the opera, and some of the leading personalities that are in Israel in terms of the cultural events that are demonstrating outside the Prime Minister's home as we speak, because as you know, in tourism, one of the deeply affected areas is just that, culture around the region. And they are hoping that the government will really lift some of the terrible hard bans that have been on them. They feel that having just 20 people separated is not going to help them survive. So they're trying to be more vocal and having a formula that will be put in place that will help them to implement better cultural events within Israel. This phenomenon is not new just to Israel, but you're seeing it throughout the entire Middle East, by the way. You're seeing a problem in terms of a lot of the cultural events suffering. And there have been, by the way, I'm starting with this for a reason, because of the demonstration that is going on, but also because there have been some very creative things. And I think that what's important to start with is the fact that Juergen is doing something extremely important by having his travel wire service that he does. I have to say that everyone that knows his organization and the news that comes out of it is keeping everyone apprised of what's happening in travel. Unfortunately, travel in the Middle East has been hit extremely hard, that every country relies on, that the really mass amount of tourism that comes into any given country is really one of the #1 economic phenomenons in that each and every individual high-ranking country around the Middle East. And Israel, and I'm glad you brought up, Peter, Israel. You know, Israel, unfortunately, is not doing so great when it came to the coronavirus cases, and therefore it backtracked. It was doing extremely well when the outbreak happened, but I think that there was mixed messages. There were problems in terms of people adhering to what some of the directives were. The directives weren't clear, and in the end, there was more of an outbreak. And especially in pockets where you had the ultra-religious Jewish community, or in certain pockets where you have the Israeli Arab community, where they're densely populated, and getting information out to people is very, very difficult. And the reason I bring it up is because right now, as of August 16th, air travel was supposed to resume. And as of today, air travel is not resuming that fast. You cannot get the government of Israel to agree that this is going to happen. As a matter of fact, similarly, we're seeing that in Jordan too. So one of the things that's interesting to dissect is the fact that governments right now are having a very difficult time in trying to ascertain when is the right time to open up the airspace, airflow for people to come in. And secondarily, how do they deal with so many issues, whether it's the internal tourism, which we're seeing a lot of, and that I want to delve into a little bit further. And of course, it's the issue of how do you deal with those that are impacted in the tourism arena, meaning the tour groups, the tour operators, the tour guides. And of course, there's that domino effect of what we're seeing of so many people that have lost their jobs. 70% of the tour guides in Israel lost their jobs. One of the most interesting things that just came out, and we're actually in the middle of a story you'll see tomorrow on our site, themedialine.org, is that the government of Israel actually came up with an idea that some of these guides could actually work as assistant teachers in 3rd and 4th grade because they feel they're knowledgeable, and it's something that can help to give them jobs back. So I'm coming kind of a little full circle right now in terms of starting with culture, telling you in terms of the air travel, which has been extremely difficult. You have several countries it's opened up here in the region, in Tunisia, Jordan, the UAE, Dubai actually in particular, and Morocco. Morocco, I think actually as we speak, it's been a problem because they were opening, they were closing because they were having numbers of COVID cases again as of last night. So this is something you have to constantly watch very closely to see, are we going to change something, not week by week, but governments are looking at it day by day. And I think that that's an important point. Israel did something very interesting, by the way. They have, as of August 22nd, that week, they're doing an entire float of cinema on the Yarkon Lake, and they're going to have 70 boats that are meters apart from each other because they found one innovative way of getting people out. I think that you're going to see more and more people using innovation and technology to try to get through these next few months because they are so daunting from many aspects, you know, from the financial aspect, from the aspect of being home and nowhere to really travel. And I think that watching that element of it from a news standpoint is quite fascinating, of what people are coming up with that are making the summer more interesting, and particularly those that like to travel, what can they do? And as far as those that are living in countries from the inbound travel, how are they going to shake it up a little and get people more out there and helping to support all of those people that are suffering, whether it's the person that has the restaurant or the bar or the person who's showing the movie.
Elise, I think that's really interesting what you're talking about, the tour guides. The mayor of Tel Aviv today announced that the city will be providing free space for weddings around the city, with the hope that people will then use restaurants or spend money in other ways to be supportive. So again, that's a very creative idea. You can use any of the city parks. They'll provide you with free park space or free places overlooking the ocean or mountains or whatever you want to overlook. Both Juergen and I are on the African Tourism Board, and one of the key elements in Africa is that they understand international travel for a while is just not going to exist. And so you have to start with domestic travel, then move to regional, and then move to international. And Africa is now really working hard at trying, especially countries like Tanzania and Kenya, Ghana, in developing methodologies to get people, the local population, to begin to appreciate their own country. And I think one of the important concepts of domestic tourism is you can't really receive somebody to your country if you don't appreciate it first yourself. And so I really want to underline some of the stuff that you're saying. I read the Israeli media every day, and so I'm well aware of a lot of the creative things they're trying to do, including creating filmmakers and creating virtual ways of keeping people interested. So the more creative we can be, no one knows when Corona is going to end. My guess is it's going to be longer rather than shorter, and we better be prepared for that. So this is a time for real creativity.
Peter, I agree. In trying to get all our technical issues resolved, I actually didn't even explain who Felice is. We did it on the invitation, but Felice Friedson is a good friend and a partner also with eTurboNews. She runs a media house in Israel, but it's based actually in the United States in Washington. And it's called themedialine.org. You can find it online, themedialine.org. We use a lot of her content. She's using some of our content because it's fascinating. She's one of the most hardworking ladies I've met in tourism, and she visited actually us here in Hawaii. I don't know how many years ago. It seemed like yesterday, but it was quite some time ago. And lives in walking distance to the King David Hotel where I stayed in Jerusalem. So right in the center of everything when it comes to Israel. But it's not only Israel, because Felice has a network of correspondents, from what I understand, all over the Middle East, and is known to be quite outspoken in a lot of things. And so their publication is fascinating. Take a look at it at themedialine.org. I also wanted to just say a special hello, what I said in the beginning, and I don't know if you wanted to say something. We mentioned the African Tourism Board, and Cuthbert Nkubi, who's actually the chairman of the African Tourism Board, is with us here. And good morning, Cuthbert. How's everything in Joburg this morning? In Pretoria, I guess that's where you are this morning. You have to unmute yourself, please. Unmute yourself, please, Cuthbert. There we go.
Oh, yes. No, thank you so much here again. Really appreciate it. It's evening already in South Africa with the lovely, weather. And we are so glad that the Minister of Tourism just announced the stabilization in terms of new cases coming in, which is a very good improvement this side of the continent. And it is with great excitement and humility once again, Juergen, to join you in your panel of discussion as we navigate our way in rebuilding our travel sector. Dr. Peter, it's just exhilarating once again to acknowledge and always noting your dedication within the travel sector, and all to your guests. It is an honor to be with you. I pray and believe that we can only beat this pandemic and move on, especially as we are rebuilding the sector, when we unify our resolves and start working together as strategic partners within the tourism sector. Thank you so much, Juergen. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you, Cuthbert. And of course, the Middle East altogether is an important region. It's part of Africa.
Oh, yes.
If you look at Morocco, Algeria, Libya and Egypt, for example. And
Yes.
if you look at aviation, a lot of the aviation links are going through the Middle East, whether it's on Etihad, Emirates, Qatar Airways, or now there are links with Air Seychelles, also through Tel Aviv. So Africa is very connected with the Middle East. Felice, I didn't want to take the show from you, but I just wanted to
No, it's fine.
you.
No, Juergen, actually, it's interesting. And I think people, look, most Americans don't know the Middle East. And we always say they're geographically challenged for those that are signing on now from the United States. But when you look at the world, they know the Middle East. And the Middle East, because of being online, which I had some problems with this evening, is something that brings everybody together. Part of what we like to do, as you well know, is try to explain what everything is about in context. So I think it's important to really get a better understanding of looking at what's happening right now in terms of travel, because, and let's go back to that GDP of the billions of dollars that are spent in the Middle East and how much loss there is and that domino effect that it has. You know, the OECD is predicting something between 60 and 80% drop if we continue at the rate we are through December. Now, that's huge. So the creativity is going to come in what a country is going to do. You know, Jordan right now is looking at a medicinal tourism, medical tourism. And the reality is, if there's no flights going into Jordan, and I think they're beginning to open up, how are you going to manage that? And you're talking about visas, and you're talking about quarantine, and each country that I've been analyzing and looking at, and it's interesting, we had this conversation today with the bureau chief, with our team that are writing, and everybody's trying to figure out, well, which country has to have you wear a mask, and which country is making you quarantine, and who is trying to woo you to come because they're going to give you a 50% reduction when you come in on the fees. So there's so much going on, but the reality is there's very little going on because right now the majority of people aren't traveling. If you really will study this and speak to the majority of people that are really trying to understand what's happening, both in terms of the business traveler, the person who is traveling for medical purposes, and of course the tourist, there's very little travel because how many people can really take off quarantine time on both sides? So I think it's important to bring up the realities of what's happening and trying to really, in this discussion, because you are in travel, you are all knowledgeable of this, what are some of the interesting things that will help shape the market moving forward so that it does come back, and it comes back with people realizing it is safe to do it a certain way. It is okay to go to certain countries, understanding that this country is adhering to certain methodology. And it is okay that you look and plan for 6 months from now and a year from now as well, because that's extremely important too. So I think that part of these discussions, it's equally as important to really delve further to understand the whole picture from a journalistic standpoint is the way I look at it, in what's really the essence of the problems that we're encountering and evaluating where we're going. I just spoke tonight too to a person who's the spokeswoman for the travel ministry. So she herself said, look, I was basically furloughed for a few months. I wasn't even working for a few months. I'm just getting back into it myself.
I think that's true around the world.
Hotels in Israel at the moment. What?
I said what you're saying is true around much of the world. That
yes,
many people,
that's right.
This is not the exception, this is the rule.
That's right. That's right. So Dr. Tarlow, and for all intents and purposes, it's a matter of really understanding, that's why I said day by day, what's really happening.
Yes.
If you look at the Hotel Association here, you have maybe half the hotels as of a few weeks ago that had capacity, and that doesn't mean full capacity. But there are some hotels, because I've called them, that were in full capacity. So then how were they adhering to all the rules? That then becomes one of the big questions. There are apartment houses opening up. There is something called Zimmers, which is a room very common in Europe and in Israel that people take, and they're getting very high numbers of, they're getting a lot of money just to woo people to come to their personal little spa and a pool that's the size of a tub. So people are trying to find other solutions to help with the boredom and to help to get them away.
No, it's Felice, one thing, and I was hoping Dr. Taleb Rifai, who was wanted to join us, but I think he had too many events. He joined us this morning, your time, and I think he was also at the African Tourism Board Hope event.
He was.
So it's another one, but he wanted to bring up the fact of regional tourism. And regional tourism, of course, has been emphasized in a lot of different parts of the world, including we've had lengthy discussion about East African regional tourism. We had about domestic tourism, and regional is pretty much the same depending on the size of your country, I guess. And in South Africa. Now, your part of the world, there is domestic tourism in Israel. There could also be regional tourism if you get along with your neighbors, like with Jordan, perhaps, and there is regional tourism in other parts of the Middle East. How is this coming together?
I think that that is a much more difficult topic. It depends on the countries. I mean, you're going to have Gulf countries going from one country to another and having stops from country to another. Turkey is a hub, as you know, both for Europe and for many of the Middle Eastern countries. So there you will see it. Israel less so in terms of countries throughout the region because they don't have relations with many countries. So there'll be that stopover flying through Jordan or flying through Turkey or through other routes. So I think that that's part of the answer to what you're asking. The other part in terms of regional tourism, I think, which is extremely important, is because of Corona, maybe looking at business people who are looking for stops and not the singular stop, sort of the regional stop that might help add and shape the visit that they might do. And that's something that I think you might see more of. It's no different than the local restaurants saying, well, if you need something from this restaurant and you might need something else from a different restaurant, there's a way of actually creating that package that you can have both and it costs less and a way to get you to two places for not the price of one, but not the price of two.
I think there's going to be all sorts of creativity. You brought up a very important point, Felice, which is that tourism is not just leisure tourism, it's also business tourism. And that has a very important issue around the world. Today, I should be in Korea, but I'm not. I'm in Texas. Why am I not in Korea? Because in order for me to go to spend 3 days in Korea, I had to spend 2 weeks in quarantine, then work for 3 days, and then spend a week before I could come back to the United States. Well, I can't afford 3 weeks of quarantine for 3 days of work. And that's part of I think the issue we're gonna have to see is not, especially business people often go to more than one place. You might be going, if you're going to the United States, Israel, you might be stopping in Germany or Spain or wherever for some other business. If you got to be in quarantine for each place, you give up. It's easier to be on Zoom. And so that's something that's going to be really important. How quickly will we switch from Zoom back to physical travel once we can? Or are we going to end up, especially in the business world, really kind of sticking with virtual meetings and avoiding terminals and hassles and masks and just being at home and you don't have to wear a mask? So I don't know the answer to that. It'd be interesting to hear your opinion. Is this a threat to tourism, the whole virtual meeting world now?
Yes, it is. And I think that you have to keep your eye on the ball. I think, Dr. Tarlow, you brought up some very good points as well. I think.
Oop, we're losing you.
One of the biggest problems that we see is the timing here. The longer that everyone stays out of it, again, those planes sitting on tarmacs, planes sitting and not being refueled, not being cleaned, not getting circulated, it's a very big problem. You have the issue of pilots that are rusty, very serious issue as well. I mean, there are many other, again, domino issues here. But I think that one of the things that we really have to wait for has to do with the vaccine. And looking at the vaccine, you have everything from the United States, and President Trump has said that he expects that one of the vaccines might be unveiled for November. We don't know. Israel is working on this, as you know, which is extremely important. And Saudi Arabia is also working on it in tandem with a Chinese company. So until the vaccines are out in mass and you see that the trials are out and we see how that they are faring, that too is going to play into the answers dealing with the entire tourism sector. Now, having said that, I think that there are two communities where you actually can look at in a different way. One, again, is the business community, because they are the ones very often we're taking 3 and 4 trips, some of them nationally and some of them internationally. And those are one of the first sectors that you'll see a lot more people coming back, and also the retirees, because for them to quarantine for weeks on end is not a major deal because they don't have to worry the same way about a job. It is a different kind of thinking. It doesn't mean everyone's willing to do that, but those are actually, I think, the 2 groups that are really the first in line to come back to tourism in a large scale. How large? One can't say. It's certainly not like the average traveler. It's certainly not like the business traveler that might travel 3 times a year, even 10 times a year, as opposed to someone who's traveling regularly, and we know this. But it's definitely at this time something that I'm sure everyone in the industry is looking at. And in terms of the regional travel packages, I think they're all going to have to be creative. I think you're going to have to see less competition. You are going to see folding of airlines, and you are going to see a way where you're going to have more people working together. Maybe you might even see countries in the Middle East that Israel never dreamed they'd have a partnership with, because you never know what kind of bedfellows come out of it in business in dire times.
And if you're looking at medication, interesting point, I don't know if you heard this, Felice, or anyone else heard it on this group, but here in the news when I turned it on this morning was that Russia claimed and now actually licensed a vaccine. And I'm a little bit worried doing this so quick that we're getting into more health problems, because if everyone else says you cannot do it that quick and it cannot be approved, and Russia is going ahead and wants to be the first one on the moon, how safe this is. Do you think we should just, everyone is so desperate, we should go ahead with whatever trial and just take a risk, or should we wait? The economy is falling apart. How should we handle this?
Yeah, I'd like to just jump in for a second. I think really we're putting too many of our eggs in the basket of vaccines. There's really 3 things we need to be thinking of. One is lots of testing, but not testing that takes a week till you get it back and it takes forever to get it done, but literally testing that can be done in 1 minute and you know right away, so that you can give multiple testing. Because the problem with testing is that I can be tested on Monday, Tuesday I go to the supermarket, touch something, get the infection, and on Wednesday I'm back and I don't even know it. So therefore, if on travel, we need to be able to allow people to be tested almost every day, so that they'll be able to feel comfortable. That's the testing part. The second part is the therapeutic part. And what I mean by that is that right now, the fear of COVID is that when you travel, if you get sick, there's no, we have no remedies. You just got to pray, you take some vitamin D and zinc, but prayer is almost as important as anything else. So I think we need to be working on a therapeutic development, so that if people do get sick, they can get well. The vaccines, we don't know how, assuming the Russians are telling the truth, which is a big assumption, but let's assume they're telling the truth for argument's sake. This vaccine may only be 30 or 40% effective. And in which case, if you don't have the other 2, the therapeutic and the testing, then the vaccine will save 30 or 40% of the people from getting sick, but you're still going to have major problems. So I think we have to look through all 3 of those. And Felice, I was hoping you would make some comments about those, because I thought your comments about pilots getting rusty is something no one has talked about. And yet, boy, are you right on when you say that.
Well, you know, Israel Aircraft Authority right now has a tender that they got through the Israeli government to set up 100 testing places in Ben Gurion Airport to do exactly what you just said, to test people. The problem is it's going to take a few days to get the answers. Somebody flying into Ben Gurion will come in, it'll take 15 minutes, but they won't have the results immediately. So that's one issue. And that's another issue, even beyond what you just said too, that's something to contend with. Until, yes, somebody has immediate tests, that's great, but I agree, you can go into a fair tomorrow or to your son's party, right, and somebody there is going to reinfect you, and there you are all over again. Right. So what are people going to do? They're going to test themselves daily? It's really a huge discussion right now. I agree with you in terms of testing, but I also think that long-term in terms, and this is long-term because I've interviewed many, many experts on this issue in terms of looking at getting a solution, a vaccine. The problem is you're gonna have to have people, no matter how you look at it, who are guinea pigs. They're gonna be tested, they're gonna be trials. We don't know if it works. So the real question is, do you wanna do those tests? Of course you wanna do those tests. But yes, you need to be tested simultaneously. And I think it's about smart decisions. The reality is it's about knowing what each country really is doing. There really should be a way that the world understands what's happening in a given country almost daily to make decisions. Because if you think you're getting on a plane and that night Jordan wakes up and has a bunch of cases, you're not getting on that plane.
No, and I encourage everyone, thank you very much, Felice, to jump in here, just raise your hand. I see there are some good comments from Cindy Hordison, for example. Feel free to jump in. We have Alexandra from Montenegro chatting. You're welcome to take the microphone and share with everyone.
Or fight with us, better yet. Makes it more interesting.
Then Jack Sawyer said, for instance, many vaccines are announced, but they're needed month for final test. Don't trust any vaccine before January. Dr. Tarlow is right. We have to wait for comprehensive testing.
So while we're waiting for people to talk, I think, you know, if I build a little bit on what Felice said, I think there's some other issues that we're going to have to look at. For example, we're looking at the safety of the airlines. Are we also looking at the safety of the terminals, of the baggage handlers, of not only the terminal when you get on the plane, but also the terminal when you get off the plane? Are we looking at people movers? I've been put on the committee that's dealing with security for the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles. So we're already assuming that there may be some form of a pandemic that's going to happen. Might not be COVID, but something else will be coming down along the line. And so we're already figuring out how will we handle a pandemic that we don't know exists, but may very well exist. So it's a future existence, not a present existence. But that means we have to look at safety from every single aspect. And it's got to be more than just the simplicity. Can we create some sort of spray that you walk through, like you go through a metal detector, that's going to disinfect you before you get into a hotel? Can we create ways that that people movers will be infecting people as they go from one part of the Olympics to another, or one part of a tourism site to another? So what it's going to mean is that we have to start at point zero and create new ideas for problems that we haven't even begun to think about. We've kind of forgotten the fact that we've had some form of a, not necessarily pandemic, but at least epidemic every 10 years. We've forgotten about that. Now, luckily, the epidemics did not become worldwide pandemics, but they could have just as easily. From SARS to Ebola to swine flu or H1N1, these are all, it's been a constancy. And of course, the more we travel, the more we spread things. So on one level, we want people to travel safely and healthily. But on the other level, the more we mix with each other, the more we bring unique problems from one part of the world to another. And even our physical makeup, the amount of sunlight that one type of skin can absorb versus another type of skin. And how will that impact the vitamin D or lack of vitamin D sufficiency within the ability to fight off a disease? So tourism is not just tourism today, it's tourism interconnected with transportation, with health, with you name it, it's one into the other. And that means we have to be able to think in very broad terms, not just in narrow terms.
You bring up an excellent point. I think what's important here is also very often goes back to directives. If you had umbrella organizations that actually were dealing with every element that you're talking about, and there was a system in place on a universal level, then it makes sense. I mean, I'm looking right now to a data in terms of like Libya has all of its flights right now that are suspended, but they're not required to wear masks in Libya. And in places, as you know, in the United States, yes, no, depending where you are, it's complicated. In Israel, you have to. I was in, the Palestinian Authority interviewing a few weeks ago. Some people had it on, some people had it off. But mind you, by the way, in the Palestinian Authority, they developed exactly what you were talking about. They actually have some kind of creation that they have. It's sort of like a terminal you walk through, and it actually disinfects a person before they go into wherever they were heading. So somebody really did create something like this. So looking at what innovation that different places are doing is helpful for sharing on a global scale. So I know that when we look things up, like you would go and look at Johns Hopkins and see what they're doing, you get an idea and a barometer of what's happening from a health perspective. But when you look at travel, and you have so many organizations involved in travel, as you both know, and as anyone listening knows, nobody knows where is that one place to go right now during COVID that actually deals with every component that you've just addressed, because it is all interrelated. And that's part of the problem we're seeing with the directives in any given country, where they fall apart and where you end up with, like you did here in Israel, reinfecting everyone and having to shut down and having it impact the economy in such a grave way.
That's what the international world today is not quite. The United Nations has come to a stop. The nations, the EU is not functioning the way it used to function. Latin America is having the same problems. I was yesterday interviewing people, Spanish speaking, and working with the head of tourism from Latin America. And again, the countries are each going in their own direction. And so the idea of international organizations is not in, what month is this? In August, the same as it was in January. It's hard to believe we're only 6 or 7 months. 7 months ago, nobody dreamed of any of this. And so in 7 months, everything unraveled. But one of the things that's important to understand is that the international organizations are no longer having the same influence or power that they had just 7 months ago. And that means everybody's on their own. And that's creating some really, Felice, you bring up, that's a very important point that you bring up. And I don't know if anybody has an answer, but boy, that's something open for discussion.
Well, that's part of discussing these things on, scales like this, discussing it on larger scales in major conferences, which are being done by Zoom. I mean, think about all of the tourism conferences that are not happening right now, that are in person, and have the revenue lost just on those conferences that are so important. I mean, it's a complicated time we're living through, but I think that it makes people creative.
But do you think, Felice, the conference business and the MICE business is in a state of panic right now? Because social distancing at a major trade conference or social distancing at an event is simply impossible. You cannot fill a room with everyone 6 feet apart. How do you see the future of conferences? I know, for example, the World Travel Market in London is on still for November. Is this realistic? How do you think, what should the conference business do to survive this?
I think the first thing that comes to mind actually is the distancing that people have to have from one another, which most people don't even adhere to in these case scenarios. So it's really a problem in terms of holding an event, having speakers. How are you going to spread it out? When people talk about weddings, and we'll go back to the weddings that Dr. Tarlow brought up earlier, in Tel Aviv, they're making people distance. They're not letting people come together. So what are you going to end up with? 100 people that you can actually fit in a room that at a distance because you can't fit the 1,000 people? I think it's going to take on a very different kind of face, that you'll have many things to Zoom. Zoom's already skyrocketed in terms of its valuation as other companies, but Having said that, I think that you will have smaller, much more insular meetings, and it's going to become, and that's a problem. That's going to be a problem because you don't have the contact with people that you used to have. And
Yeah,
you can't make the same business deals that you used to have when you don't have the contact with the people that you used to have.
I guess there are no
Someone
more
needs to
handshake
develop a
deals.
virtual kiss.
Now we have two people raising their hands. So we have Alexandra in Montenegro, and we have Lori. Let's start with Lori. Let us know where you're from and what your comments or questions are. You have to unmute yourself. Sorry.
Yes. Can I be heard?
Yes, you're loud and clear.
Great. Yes, this is Lori Friedson, and I'm a freelance journalist in New York City. And Felice, do you have any idea if the country, if Israel might be open to foreigners by the high holidays?
That's the question of the day. They were trying to open up. They were trying to open up now for August 16th. As we speak, there's still meetings on when this is going to happen. There's actually inner fighting in terms of Israel's not ready to open yet. I think we have to watch what's going to happen in the government, in the Knesset, between the health ministry and the transportation ministry, and also the czar who's in charge of coronavirus's plan. It's too early to tell you. The government wants it. The hotels want it. I don't know that it's going to happen. If the numbers can sustain, then it may not. It really is contingent on where the numbers are in terms of people who are dying from coronavirus and people that are getting coronavirus. And Israel really is one of the top countries right now based on the per capita number of people. It's actually mind-boggling when you look at the numbers in terms of Israel. And I just did that again every week. We look at the numbers in the region. And when you think about it, I'm looking right now, and Israel, has about 9 million people. As of Friday, it was 576 deaths. But if you look at other countries that are similar, they had many less deaths. Like the UAE had almost half, 354 deaths, and they're just a little bit larger than Israel. So you really have to understand that the government of Israel is very torn on what to do.
Thank you. We have Alexandra. Alexandra is in Montenegro. She represents rebuilding.travel in the Balkan region. And she's also, I learned, the honorary consul for the Seychelles in Montenegro. Welcome, Alexandra, again. Go ahead.
I would like to make a small digression and just to comment a bit on the airline safety, as Dr. Tarlow was mentioning just a minute ago. In my opinion, I think that airline authorities are not doing enough regarding protection, COVID-19 protection. When I said airline authorities, I mean IATA, IOSA, for example. They are Mr. Tarlow, IOSA is dealing with safety, airline safety, and yes. I think this issue should be under IOSA as well. So I think they just give recommendations, which is not good enough, I think. And what they should do is to set up procedures which should be mandatory for all the airlines. For example, I can give you the example of Montenegro Airlines in Montenegro, the national airline company of Montenegro. So they just, on their website, when they talk about COVID-19, they just, mention policies, cancellation policies, this and that, which is nice, but they don't have any procedures, not even temperature check for the passengers. So, I think airline authorities should be more involved in this story, if you agree. That's all. I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you, Alexander.
Thank you.
Oh.
Juergen, she's absolutely right. I mean, if you look, and we've been looking all the time, weekly, at what is each country designating for its, passengers and what it's doing in terms of what you need to do when you fly. Each one varies and they don't give you accurate info. So actually, it's an excellent point.
Yeah.
And I think that what she's also bringing up is, again, the lack of international cooperation.
Right.
It really doesn't matter if you're talking here airlines or trains or cruises or terminals, airport terminals. There are no international standards at this moment. There may be, but right now there are none. And secondly, comes the question, even if we can create those standards, who's going to enforce them? Now, will it be a IATA in the airline industry, but will they be able to enforce terminal security or terminal safety? And I don't mean terminal in the sense of death, but airport terminals. So her point is well taken. The problem is we don't, at the moment, have a system that anybody trusts anybody else. And that's really problematic. And so, you know, her point's great. Now we need to come up with some methodologies that will get us past that.
And Peter, it's even worse on a domestic basis here in the United States. You have no idea where you can go these days without going through whatever procedures. It's simply not known. We don't know. I can tell you our example here in Hawaii. We locked ourselves up, rightfully, I think, and didn't allow tourists to come in here without having to go through a 2-week quarantine. Now, we're now becoming the next hotspot for Corona, and we've been the best in preventing Corona to come in. And the reason for it is because the military has different rules. Anyone who is related to the military can come in here without going through quarantine. They can bring their parents, their children, their grandparents, their nephews, and everyone else. And these are the people you see right now in the restaurants that are open in Waikiki, having a good time. And see, there is no cooperation between local authorities, federal authorities, and I think the whole world is completely confused. So putting these type of checks and balances in on international regulations, I think it needs bilateral agreements. People are talking about bubbles in travel and going from one specific destination to another destination, and there's an agreement. I think all these things need to be put in place before we can really seriously think about traveling again. And now the Middle East, I think, specifically in the Gulf region, has been an interesting example because there are more high-tech regulations in place, at least when specific airlines control a specific market, like Emirates out of Dubai, for example, where there are uniformed regulations for anyone who wants to go on a flight from Emirates. These are not necessarily government regulations.
Of course, the problem in the Middle East, or in much of the world, but certainly in the Middle East, is the Middle Easterners say that agreements in politics are like the shifting desert sands. And so an agreement on day one is not necessarily an agreement on day two, or even what you mean by that agreement. So it almost feels like we are dealing with 19th century diplomatic language in French, where you say tremendous number of words and you mean nothing. And so everyone can interpret it the way they want to interpret it. And so that's part of it. Somebody brought, I won't say the person's name, brought up the fact that not every country even wants to be part of a world system. They would prefer their own independence and going their own way. And that's part of, I think the issue is lack of trust. Not everybody, and then there's emotions. So maybe I don't want to deal with you because I'm really mad. I think Alexandra knows, in the Balkans, when I lecture there, I tell people all the time, try to forget your history, because the more you remember, the more you're ending up reliving. And people say to me, well, this guy from Bosnia did this to me in Croatia, and this guy in Croatia did this to me in Serbia. And we're refighting wars that never seem to quite end. So we've got to come up with a way of creatively putting some of our history aside, forgetting about what was, and starting to look at what will be.
Peter, we have Lori wanted to jump in, and then I also wanted to recognize Dr. Taleb Rifai, who's joining us from Amman, and we give him the microphone very soon, and I will introduce you officially. Give me just 1 second. We have Lori. She had a comment or question. Go ahead, Lori.
Of course.
So you had mentioned that the military has different rules, which is something new to me. Why is that?
Well, I wish I had had the answer. Maybe Peter knows more. I just
Laurie,
know,
the military law is not the same as civilian law.
I can tell you on the example here in Hawaii what is quite interesting. There's military law for active duty military personnel. That's mandated by federal law. And I understand federal law is also quite protective these days when it comes to Corona. But in Hawaii, state law and the governor allowed those that are related to active military personnel that are traveling to the state of Hawaii to bypass the quarantine rules like the active military personnel was able to do. So that means they can bring their relatives, maybe even their friends, I don't know how far this goes, to Hawaii. And these are large, relatively large numbers. We're talking about between 300 and 600 people a day. And these were really the majority of the tourism that was still functioning in our state. And now many blame this type of opening to the unexpected outbreak of the coronavirus here in our region. But we can speculate on it. The military is also not releasing any numbers on bases. We have many military bases, Air Force, Marines, naval bases, everything here in Hawaii. And there's no numbers released what the outbreak really is. So again, I talked to Mayor Caldwell from Honolulu yesterday, and he told me that he's disappointed that the military is not releasing these numbers, and it could help the city tremendously for tracing if they had a little bit better cooperation. So there are problems not only on international, there are problems on domestic basis. But I'd like to thank you, Lori, and I'd like to welcome Dr. Taleb Rifai. Taleb was the former second, I know almost 99% of you know this, but I just wanted to say it again. He was the former Secretary-General for the UNWTO, the United Nations World Tourism Organization. And he has been a co-host of all our events. He's also involved in the African Tourism Board, chairs the Project Hope. And he's the one who actually started with the idea of regional and domestic tourism. And he's right in the neighborhood where Felice is. He's in Jordan. And welcome, Taleb. Really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much. I apologize first for being late. I'm sure I missed a lot, Felice. And I'm sure I missed a lot of what good discussions were all about. I had some visitors here. It's 10 o'clock here at night in Amman. So I'm sorry about this. But I just want to welcome everybody here and say how honored I am and how blessed I am to be in this neighborhood. Felice, I don't know you before, but I'm sure what you did was a great job. So I don't want to say anything, no comments on this particular event. Well, what I want to say is I'm a good listener now. Whatever is left of time, I don't know how much time is left.
Well, we're now in the hour, but maybe Taleb, since we have you on board, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your region, since we're talking about the Middle East. I mentioned in the very beginning, we had a moment of silence for the terrible situation in Lebanon. I know you may have had some insights. Whatever you think it's appropriate, feel free to share.
Of course.
Just before Taleb speaks, Taleb, I think it's really nice that your picture and Felice's picture are next to each other, just as Israel and Jordan are next to each other. And one of the things we were talking about was the importance of regional tourism, and especially Israel-Jordan tourism. And so there we have you. I mean, symbolically, there you are. So Jerusalem is not far from Amman, and I think it's really nice that, you know, the two of you your pictures are right there together.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I insisted to come tonight, although it's late. I know that. But Felice, you know, I'm a believer in people. People are people no matter what. And peace is a must. This is not a luxury, really. In our region, what's going on now in our region is very terrible. But it's only bad things that are happening before the good things happen again. I'm a very optimistic person. I'm sure what's happening in Lebanon now is shaken everybody, especially us here in Jordan, let alone the people of Lebanon. It's going to make a new dawn out of Lebanon. People there are very determined to make the changes that are necessary. Now in Jordan here, I don't know how much you know about this, Felice. We're doing very well with Corona. You know, until today, we only have 12 people died from Corona, officially. And our testing is quite good, quite big. And we have 450 cases only, less than 500 cases, most of which have recovered already. So the situation is very good here. But the problem is that we have suffered a lot economically, as you well know, because now people are waking up to the fact that people have lost jobs. People are not able to find anything to feed themselves. So I'm expecting a little bit of turbulence in our part of the world. I'm sure you know this. You know, people are going to, when people are hungry, you can't control them. But this is going to be short-lived, I'm sure, because the system will correct itself. Already today, they're thinking of reinstalling some of the restrictions that they had before, because we have 14 cases today. We were down to 1 or 2 cases every day. I know that you are doing good, relatively speaking, but we're doing much better in Jordan. Even the Palestinian territories are not doing as good as they should, really. So now what we're thinking of doing here is creating the CRZ. CRZ is something that Peter helped me put together, Corona Resilient Zone. For example, thinking of making Aqaba a resilient zone. Aqaba is 0 cases, completely 0 cases. So we can control it, can make it a safe zone, safer zone. Safer is better than safe. And we could create another bubble in Eilat or in Sharm el-Sheikh and connect them together. That's one of the ideas we're thinking of. The Dead Sea also. The Dead Sea has a few hotels there. They're excellent. And the area is controlled. In other words, you can't enter or exit that area without having to pass through military inspection spot. You know what I mean? So we could start creating certain zones like that. I was speaking to Dov, you know, Peter, you know Dov, and he's working very well with me now to try to bring some people from Israel to Jordan. Because I think what we're talking about here, it's not just domestic tourism, domestic and regional tourism. Anywhere you could reach by car is very, very useful. I think this is something that we need to start looking at as a substitute for international tourism for the time being, at least. It's not just a substitute. I always say I believe that a country that's enjoyed by its own people, not visited by its own people, cannot and should not be visited by anybody else first. So I think it's an opportunity for us to correct things that in principle had to be corrected before. You know, many people have never been from Jordan, have never been to Petra, for example. Foreigners know Petra more than Jordanians do. It's a chance. This last vacation, we had the Eid vacation. You know, our Eid is like Christmas last week. And all of Petra, all of Aqaba were full completely with Jordanians, which is something they never did before. They used to travel outside because it was more expensive to travel indoors, inside the country. Now there are good offers here, good packages. I think we need to make a change of mindset, because our people here are not used to considering local people as tourists. Tourist is somebody that comes from outside only. That's how they think about it. But actually, there's much to be done inside the country first. We need to change the state of mind. Our tour operators gave us a lot of hard time before they went into this, because they wanted to pressure us to try and bring people from outside. Nobody's going to come from outside now. Nobody's going to fly all the way to come to Jordan or to Israel just like that, just because we tell them you're welcome. We have to put some regulations in place, to put some procedure in place. To your own people in your own country, they can travel. They can and they should. I know that domestic and regional tourism are not as good as international tourism when it comes to trade exchange or hard currency, but it keeps the facilities open, keeps the job open, keeps the job up. It's a good thing to have. We need to concentrate more on domestic and regional tourism. Felice, I hope that we can work together on this. Thank you.
Taleb, it's nice to meet you. And I think regional cooperation is very important. You brought up regional cooperation, and you brought up something we were talking about earlier too, is the domestic tourism. Both are extremely important. There's a third element that enters into it too, of course, is the political. And I think that there's always politics involved. The bottom line is you have to report on it, because that's something that we do. We are a news agency, an American agency covering the Middle East. So we're reporting on things happening throughout the entire region. But in terms of what's happening in your country because of unemployment, hopefully you'll be able to sustain what's going to play out. It's not simple in any country. About 25% of Israelis also lost their jobs right in Israel. Complicated. I think that there has to be more cooperation and talking and finding solutions, and regional solutions in terms of when the countries open up properly. Israel and Jordan were battling the same issues of opening up the airs and the air flights to come in now. And right now it was just suspended and they're holding back. They're not sure when they're going to open for the same reasons. So they're in the same boat. There were other things that have happened politically that sometimes are troublesome, that also bring about big dilemmas. Just last week, and we wrote about this, there were 50,000 Palestinians that actually came through holes in walls to go to the beaches in Israel, and they weren't stopped, and they didn't quarantine. So many questions were raised. So again, if there was more cooperation and less concern about the political sometimes, you'd go a lot farther. You'd not worry so much about Corona upgrading in terms of how many people are going to be hurt by it, whether it's in Israel, the Palestinian territories, or those leaving to go to Jordan. And they are small paths from one place to another, as we all know. So I think it's important, again, to discuss the issues, to come to solutions that are extremely helpful and viable in shaping what's going to be 6 months from now or today.
You're absolutely right, Felice. And I'm glad you brought in the political aspect, because we can't hide things under the carpet. We have to talk about it. But I think what's happening now is nobody's talking to nobody, not even neighbors to each other. Every country is doing it on its own. The international system is breaking apart. It's becoming very irrelevant. I was here, I was late because I had Secretary-General of the Foreign Ministry of Jordan here at my home. We had a little dinner with her. And she was complaining about the fact that they cannot make any regional agreement. What they have to do is bilaterally speak to Egypt, speak to Kuwait, speak to Cyprus, speak to Turkey, speak to Israel, and so on and so forth. And each country is having it on its own. Now the international system will have to be rebuilt again, maybe in a fairer way and more equitable way. I think talking to each other is very, very important. Yes, I agree. Thank you.
And this is the opportunity I think we all have in your region and many other regions. We're learning. We're in a different environment. There are different leaders emerging out of this situation. We're living in a world controlled by Zoom, and in a world controlled also by selfishness, because we're all in the same boat and we're all kind of desperate going through this situation. But talks are important, and coming together is even more important. I agree with all of you. There are, so far, I don't see any more questions. If there is another question, we're like 12 minutes over our time, then I would like maybe for Felice, Peter, and Taleb to say some closing arguments. And from my end, I'm really glad to have all of you on board. We will share this again with everyone who registered. We actually had more than 200 people registered. So it looks like this is the second event today. So our turnout was a little bit less on this forum, but we have many people on Facebook, YouTube joining us as well live. And we will distribute it through our new channel. I also wanted to alert everyone, we have a new website where we actually collect all of these webinars. We're also going to convert this webinar into a podcast. And we're now approved by 8 different podcast distributions, anything from Google to Apple and some others, Spotify and some others, where you can actually see these podcasts And actually, we also have an app. I don't even know how to get this app and what the name of it is, but you can download it. But we have a website where this is all coming together. It's called livestream.travel, livestream.travel, where we include all this information. And of course, this is a rebuilding.travel seminar, so it will also be archived on rebuilding.travel. We will email it to everyone at rebuilding.travel. But then Livestream is automatically integrated also with eTurboNews. So it's visible on the homepage for eTurboNews, for TravelWire News, for Hawaii News Online, and several of our other publications. And some of the articles, or some of the sessions like this one for sure, we will convert into articles and circulate. We do work with Felice very well. As I said in the beginning, Felice has some excellent reportings, and she has reporters all over the Middle East as an American agency based in Israel. So we're sharing information. Sometimes you can read some of the content Felice is producing also on eTurboNews and vice versa. And her website again is themedialine.org. And
Felice, you're in Tel Aviv? Are you
Jerusalem.
in Tel Aviv? Jerusalem. That's closer to us.
Yes,
Yes.
she's right in your neighborhood. And
Yes.
we also be making a very exciting announcement probably in the next few days in regards to a safer tourism, how do you call it? Some people call it stamp or logo, what we have been working on. And it takes a little bit longer because we don't want to compete with what is already out there. We don't want to upset any other initiatives. We want to complement to other initiatives, and we will be releasing more. There's already a prototype you can take a look at, and even if you have comments, feel free to send us comments. If you're just going to resilience.travel, resilience.travel, if you mistype it and you type resilient.travel, it will also go to the site, it will forward. But I wanted to give the last words to Felice, Peter, and Taleb, and otherwise I see you next time. Stay tuned. We will inform you about new events, and tell everyone to get registered at rebuilding.travel. It's free and it's a good communication. Aloha from my end, and I'll let you guys, three of you, close it.
Elise,
Juergen,
you're the guest, so you speak first.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody. It was really a pleasure and an honor to be in company with all of you. I think that we all learn from each other, and that to me is key. There's a lot happening on a day-to-day basis, and in the news business, as you all know, we have to try to get as much information out to the public. It's really what we need to do. So if there's something important happening in travel or in safety, Juergen, or Peter, Taleb, please do be in contact. And the public should know that they are listened to. I think part of the problem that you have, again, goes back to communication in terms of the issues, whether it's on COVID. One of the things that we discussed earlier, and I feel very strongly about, of having an umbrella organization where there's a flow, that people understand what's happening country by country, that there's interconnection, and that I really hope that we'll have an opportunity to do a larger conference. I would love to be part of initiating something like that, and part of something like that in travel and security and dealing with all of the elements together. I think it's extremely important. Aside from that, I think that when looking at the conferences where we can't be together, we should look towards a year from now, and all think that whether it's next year in Jordan and Amman, or it's next year in Jerusalem, or it's next year in Hawaii, that it happens soon.
Thank you very much.
And Texas.
Yes, thank you.
And Texas, Peter. Yes, Peter.
Taleb.
Please, you go first.
All right. Well, Juergen likes to say aloha. So in Texas, I have to say howdy. And I'll say shalom in Sala'am. So we hit everybody, hopefully. This was a really good session because we started out talking about the importance of the Middle East. The Middle East is really the cradle of civilization. Its impact around the world is absolutely, without words, incredible. And it seems to me that if we can take the Middle East, which has given the world much of its great religions, its culture, its literature, and use that as a symbol, then the Middle East can become a place where there's also a renovation of travel and a way for people to begin to understand. Travel really begins in the Middle East, be it from a Jewish perspective, a Muslim perspective, even a Christian perspective. But in all areas, it's the Middle East, the caravans, the idea of going from one place to another and getting to know each other. And if we can take that symbolism and bring it to the rest of the world, then wow, that's a very powerful message to make the world a much better place. The Chinese like to tell us that the word a crisis is where you have danger and opportunity. Those are two roads. And I think we're now coming to those crossroads. We can either go to the world of danger and not learn to cooperate with each other and create really very terrible economic strains, or we can take this as an option for new opportunities, for a way for people to really get beyond the was and move on to the will be. So I really want to thank you all, because part of what we're doing on these weekly or bi-weekly sessions is trying to create a better world for all of us. Taleb, it's yours.
Thank you so much, Peter. You know, when people ask me, who are you? I say, I'm a Mediterranean. I believe in the concept of Mediterraneans. This is where the old world civilization was born. And part of it is in the eastern part of the Mediterranean, where we're both located in. I believe that a lot of stories came out of here, and we are not making good use of it, not just because of the economic benefits of tourism, but the political benefits of tourism. I was part of the talks that led to the Wadi Araba peace agreement 10, 15 years ago, 25 years ago, I'm sorry. And I saw with my own eyes how the first sector that bounced back and responded to peace was tourism. Suddenly, a tour operator from Israel and the bus owner from Palestinian territories and the hotel owner from Jordan made a company together. So tourism is the industry of peace without doubt. I believe in that. I believe that you can never ever hold feelings of resentment or hatred to any people that you visited, had dinner with, listen to their stories, listen to their music, listen to their dreams. That's a connection that is never going to change. All the stereotypes are broken. I remember the days after 1995, 96, where we used to receive lots of Israelis, where they would receive with open arms. I myself went to Israel, went to Tel Aviv. I went to many places along the coast and back. I was received with open arms. Unfortunately, things have changed since then. But these changes can be corrected. I believe that, like Peter said, there's an opportunity that comes out of every crisis. Crisis unites human beings. So let's work on that. Let's work on encouraging and enforcing and empowering regional tourism. Let's try to visit each other. I think that's the best way to do it. If people are left alone, they will do better than politicians. I know. Thank you so much.
Amen.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for attending the livestream.travel podcast. We see you again very soon. In the meantime, for any information, updates, and more podcasts to listen to and YouTube videos to watch, go to livestream.travel. Livestream.travel. Aloha and thank you.